Good morning and welcome to the 2020 session finale of Live at the Legislature. Every week we tell you the inside scoops on the bills that are passing and the things that are going on at the state capitol. This morning we have with us House Majority Leader Della Belatti, who represents District 24, covering Makiki, Tantalus, Papakolea, Makali, Pava'a, and Manoa, parts of Manoa. Welcome, Majority Leader. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This being the end of the session, which adjourned last week, about 2 months later than usual due to the coronavirus pandemic. Let me ask you right away, why did this session continue into July, and how was the House able to do its work passing bills with all the interruption in the pandemic?
Well, clearly the effects of COVID-19 on the world, on our state, really brought us to a standstill in March, April, and May. The legislature, like the rest of the community, took a pause, and I think it was a much needed pause. It also gave us an opportunity to figure out the process and procedures we needed to have in place to ensure the safety of our staff members, of our members, so that we could move forward and continue to do the work that we did. You know, James, we, like everybody else, learned how to telework very quickly, how to do distance working. And I think, you know, even though it was challenging, the work of the legislature continued, and you can see it in the 78 bills that we passed.
Yeah, we all have learned, just like this show, we had to learn to adjust and adapt. Well, back in January, when this session started, the legislature put together a rather ambitious package of bills aimed at making life better for working families in Hawaii. Did any of those bills pass the session?
No, I thank you for asking about that, because looking back and making my remarks for closing, it's really amazing to see the sea change that we went through. You know, you have to remember that at the beginning of session, we had record employment numbers. Practically everyone who wanted a job could have a job. Our economy was just buzzing along. There was so much hope and prospects for the future. And that was reflected in our joint majority package. And I want to thank the Senate and the governor. Senate's going to be coming on next. But we really had an ambitious plan to tackle income inequality, early learning, as well as affordable housing. And, you know, because of what's happened, and now we're at record unemployment rates, and that we're looking at food lines and things like that, we had to obviously kind of reassess what we were going to do with the majority package. I'm happy to report that on two of the key issues, affordable housing and early learning, you know, those are the two cost drivers. We were able to do a few things to move those issues forward. I think in the area of early learning and access to early learning in particular, we have continued to work to expand the preschool open doors program. We've continued to work to ensure that there is assessments of all of our keiki, or who will be entering the public school system. And we want to make sure that early learning access is something that all 3- and 4-year-olds can still achieve within 10 years. So we put that policy framework into place, as well as done a number of other things in the education arena. On affordable housing, we moved bills that would allow access to credits for the affordable housing developers to make sure that they can draw down when we made changes in the budget. You know, where we had put cash down for the large affordable housing package that we had passed several years ago, we moved those revenues from that cash into revenue bonds. So we still have a commitment to building affordable housing. And I'll also say that if you look at our CIP projects, many of the things that we've committed to building in terms of public infrastructure will go a long way to ensuring that affordable housing can continue to also move forward. So I'm pleased to report that in those two areas, we're still making progress. Clearly in the area of income inequality, now that we're seeing, 25% unemployment, and we're looking at Alice families now, increasing to 59% of the population, we are very concerned. And so we're going to have to revisit that entire issue. But that kind of conversation about minimum wage, we're not talking about jobs. we need to reopen our economy, figure out how we're going to reopen tourism, and maybe reimagine tourism, and then reimagine all of the other types of jobs so that we can get the jobs we will need for people instead of just minimum wages.
Yeah, it's a different world. And coming back into the next session next year, do you think you're going to be just dealing with the repercussions from coronavirus, or will you be able to return to some of that majority package that didn't make it through this time?
So, James, I'm a great believer that we can chew gum, talk, walk, and do all of those things at the same time. And I think that we demonstrated that the legislature could do that this year, despite the tremendous challenges we had. We did take up important issues as well as address the immediate needs that came about because of COVID-19. And I think we're going to be able to do that next year. I think next year it's going to be challenging because clearly tax revenues have just plummeted. So we're going to be dealing with those issues front and center with the budget. There was a commitment by the legislature, by the House and the Senate, to not institute furloughs and cutting of services, because we know from the last recession that doing those things actually slows down economic recovery. So the question is how do we piece all of this together? You know, there's going to be more federal legislation, federal money hopefully coming down, but we cannot put all of our eggs in that basket. We need to really understand and try to reimagine our economy, work with what we have, encourage our local economy to boost up, especially in light of now the governor's pushing back of the welcoming tourists back. I think this is the opportunity where we have to really go inwards. And I know people say that we don't have enough in our local economy to really keep us afloat, but we need to now take this time to do that. We have to figure out how do we really promote growing food for our own. How do we promote those local energy jobs? How do we promote those local health jobs? And we have the pieces in place because of some of the things that we did this year.
Yeah, you're right. And a lot of people are still suffering right now, which brings us to the Federal CARES Act money. I believe $365 million was allocated for Hawaii to offset the negative economic impacts of the coronavirus. What are some of the ways that the House the legislature has put those funds to use for people who are suffering right now?
So there's been a lot of attention paid to the monies that we are going to be allocating, but I really want to emphasize the time. You know, the legislature took the time to say that we want this money to extend from July to December. So I think that's one of the key points that I want to put out there, is that this immediate relief, we're looking at it over a 6-month period because we understand that recovery might take that long. There's been a lot of attention paid to the $100 weekly supplemental state unemployment that will go in place of the federal monies that we're going to lose, which is $600 a month. I don't want people to despair with that, because another thing that the legislature did was we allocated $100 million in the CARES money for rental relief. Mm-hmm. So in addition to the $100 a week, if you qualify for that, because that's for unemployment, that household will also likely qualify for about approximately $500 in rental relief. So this is going to be supplement. If you think about what a family might get for a month, they're going to get $100 a week. So that's $400 a month plus $500 in rental relief. And so we really want individuals to make sure that their rent is going to be paid through that rental relief program, that they can access all the things that they need for a living through the $100 a month plus up, in addition to their state unemployment, which they'll receive. And then the legislature put quite a bit of money, quite a bit of the CARES funds towards food relief, as well as PPE for various sectors that we know need to get stood up so that our family and friends can go back to work. So by PPE, what I mean by that is personal protective equipment and sanitation supplies. And we made sure that the agencies and the organizations that would get that PPE were not just hospitals, but nursing facilities, care homes, and most importantly, small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and early education, early learning centers. So, and schools. So this is $100 million appropriation that hopefully will help to ease the operating expenses that we know that all of these essential services and agencies are going to need. And hopefully, as they get the PPE, those operational costs can be mitigated for a short period of time, because at some point, everyone's going to have to, budget that into their operational cost, and then hopefully get people back to work, and hope they feel safe. And then another really exciting area of what we did with the CARES money was we put in about $56 million into assisting local businesses, manufacturing, small manufacturing companies who can start to help us, again, reimagine and pivot and refocus our economy. So those are really jobs programs. We really want the small business community to take those funds, to take the training monies that we set aside, and hopefully create jobs for individuals who are recently unemployed and get them into places where they can see some hope.
Yeah, hope is important. I just heard yesterday during the House Select Committee on COVID-19 that up to 40% of our adult population has either missed a rent payment or is expecting to miss a rent payment. And that's tragic. But when we passed the legislature passed this bill, when do you think it can get to people's hands? Is it up to the governor now?
So what was really good, and I think in part from the COVID committee, and one of the things that we learned from this experience is the importance of collaboration. So even as we put that bill to rest and figured out what we were going to do on the back end, and this is something that we did with the majority package. The legislature has been working very closely with community stakeholders, with agency leaders to make sure that these programs can stand up very quickly. So, for example, re-signing died on Friday. Monday, yes, we're back right in with a COVID committee for the House. Tomorrow, we are meeting with housing advocates and with legislators and with agency heads to talk about how are we making sure that this rent relief program is going to get stood up quickly. So we've already been talking about that, but now we're just kind of finalizing those plans. And that is, thank you for mentioning that, James, because I think people think of the legislature as passing bills. That is clearly one of the primary things we do. But we also have the power to convene. And that's what I think this pandemic has shown what Hawaii is good at, convening and collaborating. And so on the area of rent relief, the counties have been doing an amazing job as well because they had their own set of CARES monies. So what we need to do is make sure that all of these programs are working together so that people can get the relief that they need.
Yeah. Well, outside of the CARES Act funding, what are some of the other important bills that were passed during this session? I know it was shorter than usual and less total bills, but some of them were very important. Can you tell us about a few of those?
Sure. In the area of homelessness, again, that's been a very critical area that the House has been focused on for the last 3 to 5 years, under the leadership of Speaker Scott Saiki, as well as Housing Chair Tom Brower and Homelessness Human Services Chair Joy Sanjuana-Ventura. We passed a number of critical bills. One of them is going to allow for temporary leases for areas where there's been emergency homeless camps that have emerged. And so that's going to that was passed. We extended the program dates for the LEAD, the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion programs, as well as the emergency assessment programs where we help to make sure that people who are homeless and are entering our emergency room services have services outside. So we did a lot with the homelessness area. I'd also say, connected to homelessness, we did quite a bit in mental health. The legislature, and again, the House, was very concerned about the social safety net services out there. And we were working with Eddie Mercero at Department of Health. And what we're really doing there is we gave them and ensure that they have sufficient funds to make sure that their stabilization beds and the beds that they have for mental services is available in the community. There was a lot of chatter, the legislature was cutting services, and that was absolutely the most furthest thing from the truth. if there was one area that we ensured that they actually had more access to funds because we knew how critical mental health would be moving further into this pandemic was mental health. So we also worked with the judiciary, and there was a lot of criminal justice reform where we're going to see that petty nonviolent offenders, rather than incarceration, we're looking for ways to divert them into the mental health treatment arena. And through House Bill 1620 and House Bill 1661, we believe that we're going to have a program that's going to do that and mirror really the best practices that we've learned from the mainland, where instead of incarceration for these petty misdemeanors, that these individuals get committed basically and then get the services that they need within our public health infrastructure system.
Yeah, that is a critical area that people see all the time. Finally, I just wanted to ask you, there's a lot of our viewers, a lot of people out there that want some signs of hope. What can you tell them as we move into the future here? How do you feel about our looking ahead?
So what I would say is that we have to pay attention to the science. We have to pay attention to this virus. We have to be flexible and adaptable. And I think we all have to, at some point, we've already started to do it. We all need to tighten our belts. But then I think within our island state, we have demonstrated that we can crush this virus if we take personal responsibility and follow the guidelines and adhere to that and really do those things like wear a mask, stay home from work if you feel sick. And then those things, those personal things that we do will complement, I believe, what government is trying to do to provide structure and help and relief. And that if we do this together as a community, and it's going to be tough, I think that's another thing people need to hear and that sometimes they're not hearing. This is going to be tough. As we learn more about this virus and we understand its persistence and we understand that maybe it's going to be the vaccine. And that vaccine, again, listening to the scientists, 6 months out is optimistic. Maybe it's more like a year. We need to get ready for that period of time where it's going to be long and hard, and we have to depend on each other, and we have to advocate, obviously, for the relief that we need and we can get from the federal government, because all the states will be doing that. And then when we get those resources in, when we reopen our economy, slowly but surely, I think we will come back as a community, because that's the strength of Hawaii. We do this together.
Thank you, Majority Leader Belatti. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Olelo, for all of this opportunity to tell our story.
And thank you to all of our viewers. We'll see you again next season with Live at the Legislature.
Five, four, three.
Aloha. As you can see, we're broadcasting today's program from my home in respect for the Shelter-in-Place Directive, so that you can meet the people who continue to make a difference in our everyday lives.
And the winner is...
And the winner is...
And the winner is...
Aloha, Randy, what are you looking at?
Oh, hi, Young-hee. I'm looking at this postcard.
Oh, you're looking at vote by mail postcard.
What is vote by mail?
Starting this year, we'll be voting by mail instead of going to polling station.
Okay, what does that mean?
That means you'll receive your ballot in mail, and you have to send it in, and they have to receive it by August 8th for primary election, and by November 3rd for general election.
Oh, that sounds pretty easy.
If you have any questions, you can go to olvr.hawaii.gov.
Ah, thanks, Young-hee.
You're welcome.
Do you know which political candidate is the best choice for you and your community? Olelo Community Media invites you to meet the candidates running for Hawaii offices in the 2020 election. See their short videos, hear their messages, make a sound decision for voting. Visit olelo.org/CIF for more information.
Aloha and welcome back to Live at the Legislature. I'm the Hawaii State Senate's Communications Director, Jesse Broder Van Dyke. Last week, the legislature adjourned for the year after a session that was interrupted several times in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our guest this week to wrap everything up in our final episode of the year, coming to us live from Lihue, Kauai, is the President of the Senate, Ron Kouchi. Aloha, Senate President. How is Kauai this morning?
There was a little light rain earlier, but the sun's coming out and, living up to the wonderful song, Beautiful Kauai.
Last month, you joined the governor and the House Speaker and the mayors in announcing a plan to reopen tourism with pre-testing before tourists fly here. Due to the explosion of COVID-19 cases on the mainland, Governor Ige announced yesterday that the opening to tourism will be delayed until at least September 1st. What do you think about the governor's decision, and how do you think this will affect Kauai and the other islands?
Well, the missing part of the press coverage was always that our target is, but we will have to assess the conditions that are in place at the time. 2 months ago, when we started the discussions and the first result was opening up Inner Island, there was almost no positives in the state of Hawaii. We were in single digits and had a few days of zero statewide, and it wasn't so bad on the mainland. The mainland started to ramp up, and as we increased cases here in Hawaii, medical supplies became short for what we need to do testing, certainly changed our perspective. And having watched a lot of CNN over the last several months, Dr. Fauci's words still ring clear in that we don't control the calendar. The virus controls the calendar. And so I would just let everybody know for September 1st, it's the next targeted date, but it will depend on what's going on globally, and then certainly what is happening here locally to see what we can do. And then most importantly, I think listening to the interviews with the mayors yesterday and this morning on the morning news shows, the governor's press conference, having a digital platform to be able to track the data in real time for those who are in quarantine is going to be an effective tool that is not one that we would like to have and it would be good to have. It's one that we must have if we're going to reopen. This gives us some additional time to continue to work on the development of the digital platform, and hopefully by September 1st, it will be ready to go.
Among other things this session, the Senate worked to distribute hundreds of millions of dollars in federal CARES Act funding to help Hawaii families make it through the shutdown. You provided $230 million to provide additional support to people who lost their jobs due to the pandemic and are on unemployment insurance right now. As of now, the federal plus-up expires at the end of this month, but because of what the legislature did, there's going to be some additional relief to people.
So there'll be an extra $100 a week, and that's what we could afford to do, realizing people will need added assistance. The second thing that the majority leader didn't cover, because she did a great job in talking about a lot of the programs, but we also have that 50% of your rent or $500 a month, whichever is less. So that's another $100 million committed. What is really fantastic about what Chair Della Cruz and Chair Luke did in that rental assistance program, everybody's focused on the person out of work and the challenges in making their monthly payments and taking care of their families. And, that's certainly critical, but somehow missing in the conversation. In Hawaii, we have a lot of people who invested by buying a second or third home, and they have a mortgage to pay to continue their ownership. So when they can't collect rent, then how are they able to pay the banks? And this is a mechanism that helps the people who need the rental assistance, but also by ensuring that they have an ability to pay their rent, then they're able to get the money into the owner of the property, who can then make their payment to the bank. And so we get a double spin off of that $100 million investment in rental assistance. And then in the first special or short session in May, we had deployed $175 million to the counties. The city and county had qualified outright for about $360 million. And so, on Oahu, they stood up that economic development office at the Blaisdell Center. There is assistance for small businesses in the county's money. On Kauai, Mayor Kawakami committed 2.25 or 2.5 million to mental health services provided by nonprofit groups, as well as domestic violence and abuse. 1.5 million for making Wi-Fi access available countywide or more available, and also in increasing the digital platform broadband capacity. And all of these things become important as we look at how do we reopen schools if distance learning is still a part of that plan. There were some gaps in people who weren't able to connect. And by partnering with the county, using the money they got, the money we have, and the private providers, we're hoping to really make sure that each student has access to the devices and the connectivity. More importantly, those devices and connectivity can be used for those families who, for many of these job applications, need to do it online. Also, one of the big opportunities that has come about through the pandemic is the rapid acceleration of transforming into telemedicine. And this will also really broaden the opportunities for families here in Hawaii to avail themselves of telemedicine. And we hope that that will wind up where you'll have not only better service, but have it in a more cost-effective way to continue to keep healthcare reasonable and affordable for our residents.
And speaking of rolling out technology, you recently announced the Kauai Education Technology Pilot Project, which you're working on with the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation and another other nonprofits. How's that going so far?
Well, it's going great. And, we realized as we're heading into early May that there was not enough data to decide what to do. I saw that California state colleges were now going to be 100% distance learning in the fall, and what was going to happen to our students if we were in 100% distance learning situation. So with 100,000 from Hawaii Community Foundation to seed, 150 from the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, 100 from Bank of Hawaii, 25,000 from First Hawaiian, Onuaola, 50,000 from the Atherton Foundation. My wife Joy and I donated 15,000. We just received word that Central Pacific Bank was going to make a contribution to the fund as well. It will allow us to buy devices, so every student in public school will have a device. It will allow us to get hotspots so that for those who don't have the internet access, they'll be able to have the access. And most importantly, this week, they are starting training 2 or 3 teachers in each of the schools. The 5 charter schools are looking to be rolled in, but to have them get the training to be better distance teachers. We had a lot of, a good percentage of one-to-one here on Kauai. Unfortunately, we were all structured in a way to deliver in-classroom instruction and not to do it by distance. And so, the training is critically important so that everyone can be effective. And the Department of Education plans to have a help desk so parents can call in who would need help. I, for one, am not very well versed in technology. So if I were to be working with my children, the help desk would be important to help me better understand everything that I have. And then for those families without that connectivity and device, we're not just teaching students, but we're really broadening the opportunity for the parents in that home as well.
Is this something you're looking to roll out to the other islands?
The two individuals who have helped me get the program off the ground are from Oahu. They have been in touch with complex area superintendents on Maui, on the Big Island, and they've been in discussions here or on Oahu. Micah Kane, the head of the Hawaii Community Foundation, has held money in reserve so they could provide seed money to assist any of the other complex areas that would like to move forward and replicate what we've been doing here on Kauai. And when we started this, it was clear that we wanted this to be a model that could be replicated throughout the state.
Well, this was definitely one of the most unique sessions in history with all the stops and starts due to COVID-19. We finally got through the end of the session last week with a number of bills and nominations passed. Any highlights that you want to go over today?
It's just, 2 years in a row that the confirmation process for cabinet members wound up being pretty contentious in the Senate. And as I mentioned on my closing remarks, there are normally blocks of votes in the Senate that get together, and that's how the organizations get created. A lot of it is based on, philosophy and where you'd like to see Hawaii going. But in the case of these nominees, there really were divisions among the various blocks, and it wound up being a real challenging time to navigate, but I am just really thankful that all of that didn't get in the way of the legislation that we were able to pass, and we were able to get the work for the people of Hawaii done. But we're hopeful that coming into next year, that we're looking at some of these opportunities, like how do we expand telemedicine, roll that into reducing the cost of healthcare? How do we continue to work with local farmers producing food for our schools, our hospitals, and our prisons? We aren't going to have the visitor industry counts that we did, and so we need to supplant all of the produce that those restaurants and hotels were purchasing. And then clearly the other opportunity that's presented to us, there was much discussion as we came into session about over-tourism, carrying capacity, what can the infrastructure handle? And clearly, we've got the reset button, and this is a hard restart, in fact, not reset. And, we've got the chance to try to redo it, and it's incumbent on us to do it right. And those are some of the real opportunities that have come out of the situation we face ourselves in. And I would just echo what the majority leader said. Continue to practice safe social distancing, hygiene, including washing your hands, sanitizer. Use your mask. Again, your mask really protects other people from you. And so when you're not using the mask, you're really telling people that I don't hold you in high regard and I could care less about you. And we're really not a selfish culture. It's about ohana. And that's why I believe Hawaii has still had some of the lowest numbers in the country.
Absolutely. And we're not wearing our masks right now because we're both at home. But when we're at the Capitol last week, we're all wearing our masks, including you presided on the Senate floor with your mask on. There you go.
I've got a medical checkup right after this. I need to sit in my car. I need to wait for the text message to let me know that I can come in. It's the first time I'm going back to see my doctor for a non-essential procedure, so I'll get a chance to witness firsthand, some of the changes that they are making in trying to resume back to some semblance of normalcy.
We just have a couple minutes left, but the Senate is expected to come back into session later this year to work on a Supreme Court nomination.
Well, we're going to come back maybe in the third week of September for 10 judicial nominations. They are primarily district and family court, and I believe an intermediate court of appeals. And with the amount of candidates the Judicial Selection Commission needs to go through, what we're going to do is have another 10 before the end of the year, and in that second batch will be, the nominees to replace retiring Justice Pollack, who turned 70 a couple of weeks ago. And so, we'll see 20 judges before the end, and, at least one intermediate court of appeals and one Supreme Court justice. The other thing that we would look at is, if the HEROES Act does pass in some form and we need to appropriate money, then we may see the House and Senate come back together and, at that point, to make sure that that money gets out to the people who need it, we would be immediately coming back to resolve that.
So that's the Federal HEROES Act, right? We had the Federal CARES Act, which we already distributed the money on, and we're kind of waiting for the United States Senate to pass the HEROES Act.
And then if, Majority Leader Belatti for the House wasn't clear, but the big difference is in March we recessed, which meant all bills pending were still active. We came back in May and we recessed, which meant all bills pending were still active. But last Friday we adjourned sine die, which said we are done. So all of the pending bills are no longer active. They have died for the year. So they would have to be reintroduced next year to be considered. So if we come back, we'd come back for specific items only, but all of those bills would no longer be in play that were pending the previous two times.
Well, thank you so much, Senate President, for joining us. Unfortunately, we're out of time. This is our last episode of the year, but we thank you so much to everyone who's been tuning in.
And we just want to say a quick mahalo on behalf of the Hawaii State Senate to Olelo for making this opportunity possible for us to talk directly to the people of Hawaii.
Absolutely. I came to them one day and said, can you please figure out a way we can do this show remotely? And they figured it out. And here we are still on the air. So thank you to everyone at Olelo. And thank you, Senate President. And thank you, everyone, for watching at home. Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Nancy Creedman. I work with the Domestic Violence Action Center. There's never been a better time for helping. There's never been a greater time for healing. At the Domestic Violence Action Center, we do both. We're available to support you 24 hours a day, by telephone, by text, chat, online. Your safety is our priority, so feel free to reach out to us. There's healing and there's hope.
COVID-19's impact on Hawaii is intensifying daily. At Hawaii Food Bank, we're facing an unprecedented challenge of providing food for those affected by the pandemic while continuing to meet the needs of the 1 in 8 residents already struggling with hunger. Food donations are significantly down. We are purchasing more food than ever to provide safe food access to every member in our ohana. Visit hawaiifoodbank.org to help us respond to our communities. Hawaii is strong. We will endure and rise resiliently together.
Good morning and welcome back to the season 3 finale of this very unprecedented session of Live at the Legislature. Joining us this morning is Representative Gene Ward, who serves as the House Minority Leader, and Representative Bob McDermott, who serves as the Assistant Minority Leader, joining us from their homes in Hawaii Kai and Ewa Beach. Good morning, Representatives. Thanks for joining us again.
Morning, Kyle.
Morning, Kyle. Good morning, Ola. Hello.
So we're coming actually full circle here because we had both of you on March 17th, which was our last in-person episode, the day after the Capitol had closed down. Did you ever expect that 4 months later here we'd be interviewing each other through webcam and all the changes that went on?
Go ahead,
you know, the theme of my office is TOA, tolerance of ambiguity. They taught us in the Peace Corps, expect the unexpected. So when it happens, you're not surprised, but quite frankly, you know, the whole world has been surprised. The nation and Hawaii is kind of waking up to, wow, what happened? Well, we're getting through it. There's been some good things. And I think, Kaya, we're going to have a little bit of difference with the majority. The loyal opposition has got a little bit of a different take. And I know we'll get into that. Maybe Bob's got some opening remarks also.
Yeah. Gene and I are focused on getting the economy reopened. And we did that with our plan initially. You know, 3 months ago, we asked for quotes as a customer for the testing machines, right? In April, I think it was, April, May. Anyway, we got quotes. And they told us, look, $2,500 a machine, rapid testing. You can do with 4,000 machines, we can do about 9,000 tests a day, but don't expect them till November. I am convinced that this administration hasn't even probed into that yet to purchase extra testing machines. They're going to need them. They're going to need them. And in the paper this morning, they said Hawaii is not going to test anybody who comes here. We don't want to. We don't want to test them. Okay, we want them tested where they leave. But if somebody shows up, well, let's take care of it and get them out the door and spending money. And if they're positive, they're going to be in the quarantine paying for that. So we've got to be smart. And Gene and I we have concerns over the command and control structure and the execution of any rollout plan, which we haven't seen any yet. So it's a little different than moving money around for welfare and CARES money and, you know, internet for kids. And now you have the teachers complaining 4 feet. Is that enough? I mean, we haven't even addressed the education component. And we're just trying to get the door open safely.
So
let me piggyback with that one, because that's a real big issue that hit the papers yesterday when the EGA said, you know, we're not going to open until September 1. September 1 is caused by, well, let's say the postponement is caused by the spikes on the mainland as well as the spikes locally. That's a function of social discipline. I didn't say distancing, social discipline. Put on a mask, stay away from mass crowds. And the average age now of the infected is 31 years old. Punishing businesses by not opening them is not going to change the behavior of these 31-year-olds. That's what I'm thinking. If that's a misplaced priority, we're going to be punishing our business. And a lot of the downside of the economic debt that we are getting into is, I think, being papered over by the majority. They think all is well. Look, we've done a good job. We've given unemployment. We're supplementing rent. That is good, the safety net. But 75% of all of our income in the state of Hawaii comes out of the private sector, holding taxes as well as 50% from GT taxes. If we're going to put our head in the sand saying, you know, we're going to have exactly 0 cases, I think we're going to end up we're choking ourselves on the death that we're doing by promising to people that everything is okay. So I have some real doubts about what we're going to happen in the September opening. We're probably still going to have the social discipline problem, and we're going to punish the businesses.
Yeah, and to piggyback what Gene is saying, Kaio, is that if we would have planned correctly and implemented the things we would have done, the rate on the mainland wouldn't have mattered because you had to get tested prior to coming here, right?
Amen.
If you showed up and you didn't have a test, we throw you in the Abbott machine, which can do 4 an hour. You got 4,000, that's 10,000 a day. We don't want to do it again, but if we have to, we would, and then we get you in Waikiki spending money. It wouldn't have affected us just marginally because we already got this system in place. And we would have ordered, if we did it with military precision, we would have ordered additional reagent materials in advance of just-in-time stock replenishment, which is what we were doing. So we didn't think. And then we have a Department of Health that doesn't believe in testing. I mean, it's no secret now. They don't believe in testing. They don't believe in temperature checks. They don't believe in contract tracing. All these things they said they believe in. We really don't want to do them. They're not 100%. Just let the virus come in. Just bring in the viral load. I don't want to do that.
Making Hawaii safe for travel was the first written plan. And that was the first thing about it. The first thing was, 4 months ago, everybody said, you can't do this. This is impossible. The DOT, the FAA will not allow it. Well, yours truly and Bob went to the White House, got those guys in a discussion with the DOT and the FAA, and Hawaii was the first one to get the green light.
Now, let me toot Gene's horn for him. Gene is a Republican National Committeeman. He has contacts in D.C. He met with the contacts. He badgered them over the phone. Department of Transportation, Gene talked to the FAA, Gene talked to Homeland Security. He said, give me language that we can give the majority to make this doable. And he got the bill and he gave it to the majority and said, you guys introduce it. You take ownership of it. They ran away from that like they want nothing to do with it.
So I'll just run the timeline for the viewers. It was May 18th that Rep. McDermott, you had introduced the Making Hawaii Safe for Travel to the House Select Committee with Rep. Ward. And then I believe it was the 20th that Rep. Ward had gotten the clearance from the White House. So here we are, Friday, final vote, final reading for all the bills. Can you talk about the amendment that you introduced, Rep. McDermott?
So we got the whole report or our plan in earlier in the session, kind of snuck it in as comments in the journal. But then there was an amendment for a bill of health. We just laid in the steps, the 10 steps that were on page 4 of our plan. Very sequentially how to do it. I think Gene and I are going to have a meeting tomorrow with someone very important, and we're going to ask, what is your command and control structure? Because I think he's drowning in quicksand. They don't know what they're doing. Everyone's stovepiping, and it's not the way you run a big operation. We have a crisis, just like a hurricane or a dam busting. We have an economic crisis, and we can address the health component, but we're not addressing the economic component. And the two have to be both addressed at the same time, as I'm sure Gene would agree.
Totally agree on that. If there's anything, it's a wake-up call that we are dependent upon our small businesses. And Kaio, I'm concerned that if we open up in 2021 with the amount of debt, we're passing this on to our grandkids and our grandkids. We got a great subsidy from the feds, but look, that's a dependency. And what my fear is, when you go to a doctor and you got a broken leg, he gives you a cast and said, look, in 6 months, 6 weeks, your bone is going to heal. That's the natural process. When we put a cast on, we give them like 6 years. And that's the dependency. I'm afraid we're progressively moving along towards getting a dependency with the people of Hawaii, even facial recognition that we're going to have now at the airport, a bad thing that's occurred. We've slapped the face of the police officers by a bill that we passed for them. That's another thing. Bob, you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, when we convened the special session, the despicable murder of George Floyd just took place. So the left, outraged, went and grabbed any bill they could find in the top drawer that would harass the police, rein them in. You fast forward 8 weeks later, the context has changed. The police are being set up as victims, ambushed, assassinated, disrespected all over the country. And so now we passed this measure because we got a couple of lefties in the House and the Senate who can't stand the police, and they love everything left, Antifa, all that stuff. And it was funny because I said, well, this has to do with George Floyd. And Chris Lee, the Judiciary Chair, stood up and said, oh, this has nothing to do with George Floyd. And then John Mizuno went on a 20-minute George Floyd's creed. Black Lives Matter. And he said, but anyway.
But the unkindest cut of all is at a time when we're $3 billion plus in debt, everybody's hurting, and we give a pay raise.
Yeah, and
that's going to be one of the scars, the landmark things of, okay, there was a COVID session, we had 3 different in and outs, but it's going to be remembered. This is the time that we have the pay raise. 80% of the public is saying, why are you guys giving me pay raise? In fact, I heard yesterday, the University of Hawaii is refusing to let go of that money to give the pay raise to their individual. that is a very wise decision, and that represents the public opinion. Why give a pay raise when you are so in debt?
What's that, Kyle?
Can you talk a little bit more about that pay raise bill and the discussion that went on in the House?
So that it gets bogged down in technicalities. These people earned it. They worked hard. We don't begrudge them it. It's not a big raise. It's normally like 2% over a couple of years. It's very modest. That's collective bargaining. They bargained in good faith and they earned it. However, the timing is terrible. We got a 3.2 billion with a B deficit, and then we say, well, let's load another 150 million on top of it. All it's going to do is cause the entry-level public worker to be laid off sooner and quicker, because they got to make it add up from somewhere. So they're going to cut 20%, and it's going to be the first in, the new hires, and they'll be without jobs. But they'll be without jobs at a faster rate because we passed this race, as if we would just left it alone. So the paper said he should veto the raise. He's not going to veto it. He'll sign it and then just lay people off because he negotiated.
One of the dirty pool efforts in the narrative and the story and the record of that pay raise is I put an amendment to the leadership as well as the clerk. I was told I couldn't amend it. And what I was going to have is the amendment where they will set a date so they can pay it later. In other words, it's just the way that the legislators pay was postponed until next year. We should have postponed those. So I put in an amendment. It was accepted and then it was rejected because of some mumbo jumbo technicality of which was after the fact, totally not true. I got an apology, but it basically blocked the democratic process. And I was, quite frankly, let me use the word upset. I didn't use the word P, but it's where that stuff is sometimes, in fact, Bob, your amendment was almost ruled out of order until we went over there and said, look, you guys can't do this again. You got to stop doing that.
Yeah, let's not go too far inside baseball, but we're trying to change the legislation as it comes to the floor, and we're blocked at every move. But we want to get things in the record so other people in history can see, hey, these guys didn't agree with the pay raise. They tried to change it to, they're not against the employees getting a raise, just now is not the proper time. Exactly. When your checking account is overdrawn, you don't keep writing checks. You wait till you get some replenishment, except in the McDermott house. But otherwise,
Okay. Sorry, Kyle, we've taken over your role.
No. Going on the theme of economic development, jobs, everything, Rep. Ward, you introduced the floor amendment for the Stadium Authority bill. Can you talk a little bit about that? And the Star Advertiser had just reported that if the stadium is delayed, it would cost about $20 million more than the already $350-ish million price tag.
Yeah, we're talking about $350 million for a new stadium, which we do need. The rusting thing has had its day. Thank God Frank Fassi didn't know it well. Unfortunately, he didn't know what he was doing. He did the right thing, but he didn't buy the right product. What we've got is a floor amendment that went forward, was discussed, and for the life of me, I cannot believe why all of our colleagues would turn down $100 to $500 million for naming rights. Naming rights is a very common practice where Budweiser or FedEx or any of those will have booths, they'll have the name, they'll have all of the advertisement. Even if it's a Pepsi, they have only those drinks that go into it. And what we have is a $150 million pay raise we'll go for, but in terms of putting back in the coffers money by using innovative, creative, entrepreneurial thinking, they say, oh, no, we don't want to do that. So for the life of me, the people of Hawaii got to know this legislature is not fiscally responsible. They've done a good job in terms of the social net, the unemployment, we got rental assistance. But in terms of the economy, and quite frankly, when it gets down to 2021, if we don't help small businesses, they're going to die off. If they die off, 50% of all of our money in the treasury comes from GT taxes, 25% from withholding tax. We kill off small business, we kill off government, and then all of the people are saying we've done great things for the people. I think it's going to come back and bite them.
So how would you want the role of the minority to be remembered during this session?
Okay, Bob, you got it?
I think we led in the fact that because we were nimble and agile, we were able, Gene and I and you and the whole team, and it's not just Gene and I, it's the whole staff, Julie, Tom, Lafa, everybody, Josh, and Kip, Eric, I don't want to forget anybody. Everybody came together to work on this plan to reopen Hawaii and make it safe for travel. And we were out there way before anybody. And we're the only ones with a sequential step-by-step plan, which also cares about the employees in the visitor industry, requiring testing for the hoteliers and the rental car agents. These are people who are on the front lines. The poor flight attendants are going to go down like flies if these people aren't tested. I mean, they're just in training, they lost 14. How many are they going to lose when they're actually in the air in a plane full of COVID, which we now understand can be spread in aerosol fashion? They're walking through it back and forth. It's just a matter of time. So how do we deal with this? The good news is there are treatments and other things that are making COVID easier to live with. Dr. Bartlett in Texas uses a nebulizer with asthma medicine, and he's had 100% success rate. Gene, you saw his interview, right? Dr. Bartlett. You said it to Josh.
Very encouraging. In fact, Bob, we're also encouraged by the Israeli company that's working on the breathalyzer, which in 90 seconds can be game changers, and all of this doom and gloom stuff about the economy can turn around rather quickly.
When are they coming?
It said 7 to 10 days. We'll do a show and tell with the lieutenant governor.
From now, or it should be?
It should be next week. Now that we are already on Tuesday, probably next week.
Okay.
And just like that, we're out of time. But I just wanted to thank
cannot be. I haven't said we're going to get through this, people. Keep strong, stay strong. We're Americans. We are resilient. We're confident. We're innovative. We're creative. We're going to get through this, but don't get down into the doom and gloom like so many people are shut up in their houses. We're going to be a free people. Just stick with us. Wear your mask. Keep the social discipline. You guys who are in your 20s and 30s, you guys don't think you are invincible. You're vulnerable. You guys are now the peak rate of what's going on. And Bob, thank you for all that you've done. Working together with you has been a pleasure. Thank you, Alelo, for having us. Thank you for listening to the other side of the story, the loyal opposition. We love Hawaii, but we can do better than some of the things that we're in trouble economically. We've got to get out of this hole.
Yeah. Gene, I'll call you later today. Kaio, thank you. Mr. Graham and on the Alelo team, thank you guys. You're great. We appreciate all the hard work you put in for us, and minority research too. We stand on your shoulders.
Thank you again.
See you next year.
Hello. And for more updates, follow us on social media at Hios GOP on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. With that, we will see you all next year. Aloha.
Okay.